So thank you all for braving the weather and for coming out tonight. I know you would not all be here if it was not for these three special guests that we have in front of us, and Billy Sullivan on the phone, which I know is a little bit awkward, but Billy does have a lot to say and add, and we really wanted him here, even just for a couple questions. One of the things that I think is so nice about the group that we have tonight is it's really a group of artists from very different places, literally. Aliza is from Mexico City. Billy is the one person from New York. He's born in Brooklyn in 1946. I think a very different Brooklyn than we're used to today. D'Angelo is from Jackson, Mississippi, and Marilyn is from Shreveport, Louisiana. And, as John said, the show didn't set out to be, but kind of became a little bit of a story about the New York art world, almost a love letter to the art world in some ways. And so I thought I would start asking each of you to maybe tell a little bit about your own origin story with regard to New York City, maybe remembering back when you first came here. Okay, well, there you go. So anyway, if you can each maybe talk a little bit about those memories, and Billy, if you can, because we're going to come to you as well, if you can remember some of the things about your initial foray into the New York art world, even as a New Yorker, back in what must have been probably the 60s or 70s. I think that'd be really interesting to hear. So, Marilyn, maybe we'll start with you. You can tell us about coming from...
Well, I have the longest story. I got here in 1976 from Syracuse University, and believe it or not, I had choices of lofts, 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet, for $250 a month rent. And I even knew somebody who bought their loft for $1 a square foot. And I remember a friend of mine bought hers, Cynthia Carlson brought hers for $31,000, and she thought she was getting ripped off. And it was very dangerous. Everybody got mugged. Everyone.
This was in Soho, I presume?
Yeah, Soho. Yeah. I'm on Mercer Street, still there, and I'm a renter, so I'm one of the people that fell through the cracks. That was really beautiful, because in my building there were 12 of us. So when they tried to get rid of us, we could afford a lawyer. And so I was in court for 20 years probably, and I had a camera aimed at my front door to make sure I stayed there. But where was I going to go? Mm-hmm. At 2,500 square feet, I paid nothing. So I think actually the reason I'm still an artist is because I had that loft, that I didn't have to. I saw everybody I know being squeezed out. My whole building's filled with hedge funds, and Wall Street. And they pay a lot of money.
And how was it for you back then? Were you selling work right away? Did it take a long time? How long were you a struggling artist for?
Now. It never gets easy. I always tell my students, don't do this unless you have no choice. Mm-hmm. But I was lucky enough that I could teach. So I had that income. I taught at SVA. I started actually teaching it, and as a substitute teacher, I get calls at 6:30 in the morning, to go to this school and that school, and that's how I really learned New York City. And then my first showing was in the East Village. I was in a collaboration team, and that broke up, and that's when I went to enamel paint, and I ended up, because we were showing in the East Village, I got a job at the SVA, and I'm still there, and I love teaching.
And I imagine you're still close friends with many of the people you were you were with back in those days?
Most of them, I say I'm really good friends with a lot of artists. I make a point of, this is something we could talk about, friends and lovers. When I see a really good artist, I really hate them. And I want them to just drop off the face of the earth. But I've learned, because that I don't want that poison, so I go up and say, wow, you're really good. And I love your work. And even if they're assholes, at least I don't feel the poison actually drains the minute I say that. So I advise all of you, if any of you are artists, go up and tell your heroes how much you love their work. And then you become colleagues, and it's sort of, you mean it.
It's interesting because I think many people don't think of artists as being that competitive. You know, it's kind of a, but artists are really competitive, huh?
Right.
All right, on that. Apparently everybody else realizes that, maybe just me. So Aliza,
You really believe that?
I always thought artists were just so nice and friendly all the time. All right, Aliza, tell us about your...
That should be your question.
Yeah.
Who's really hurt you? I bet you got someone, D'Angelo.
Is this working? I don't know.
Yeah, it'll work once you start talking into it.
Okay. So I came in 2008, and I've been in the U.S. practically half my life, but my mom's American and my dad's Mexican, and I moved from Chicago. I had studied undergrad and grad school there, and then a lot of my friends had moved to New York, and so I was like, okay, I'm going with this group, and my friend Patricia Tribe, Josephine Halverson, all these people that influenced me when I got here were here, and I had a tiny studio, and I was an abstract painter in Chicago for like almost 10 years. I was trained as a figurative painter, then I was an abstract painter, and then I was here, and I had a tiny studio, so I started making... I was thinking of like the flower bouquets that sellers sell in Mexico on the streets, and so I would go into bodegas and I would buy these little flowers, and I would start, and it started my figuration again, you know. And I was also teaching. I started teaching homeschool kids when I first got here. Then I started teaching at LaGuardia Community College, a drawing class that started at 6 a.m. So but they were amazing students because they were sometimes night porters and people that really wanted to take classes. And so, like, I remember showing William Kentridge's animations at 6 a.m. and we were all kind of like really out of it, but drawing, you know, and making these animated drawings. And then I ended up teaching full-time at Columbia and just leaving almost like 2 years ago. And, you know, I do really miss teaching, and pedagogy and that kind of engagement has become a big part of my work. And so it's like a way of witnessing people, and teaching is really incorporated into my work quite a bit.
That's interesting, yeah. So many great artists have also been teachers and maintained that teaching interest even well after they needed to, for sure.
Yeah. And just going back to what Marilyn was saying about, I mean, I feel like it's like artist friendships is really what sustains you, you know, and in some ways there's like a productive competitiveness, but also like a kind of like inspiration, because if you're just based on the market or anything else, it's really other artist discussions and that competition and that collegiality that really pushes your work.
The best compliment is when your friends that you respect say, I'm so jealous. I hate that. Yeah, that looks so good.
And so, D'Angelo, you know, Jackson, Mississippi seems like a pretty far away place from New York. Did you envision yourself, or did you fantasize about coming to New York when you were younger, growing up there?
I did not see New York as like a place that I would come right away to be an artist. I just knew I wanted to be an artist as a child, and that journey kind of like slowly led me to New York, from going to Memphis College of Art for undergrad, and then my first time in New York was when I went to Syracuse for grad school. And then I would visit here, see shows with my cohort, and just, you know, like I had friends who had moved here, so it was, you know, it was good to have people who were familiar, and, you know, meeting other people, of course, along the way, other artists. But I started showing with Higher Pictures in 2017, which was maybe my second year of grad school. So that was like, you know, more consistent, you know, interactions here, and exhibiting here as well. But I mean, New York City has just been, it's been a place of many firsts for sure, and it has felt competitive, it's felt, you know, inspiring, and all the grunginess and dirtiness of it all. But it can be hard to like make friends or have lovers, you know, or, you know, just live your life. But I would agree with both of you all that it's, you know, it's really somewhat inspiring to like, you know, reach out to the people who do inspire you, and you want them to keep inspiring you. And it's nice when others also see you as an inspiration.
For sure.
And that may be just through the work or meeting you in person. You never know really what it is until you're told, or you just feel it, But yeah, like I feel like New York has like made me want to become a better artist just from all of the great art that I've seen, the friends that I've met, who, may start making art, when that's not what they did when I met them. So it's like, it's a number of things for me, yeah.
All right, let's try Billy here for a second. Let's see if we can make this work. So, Billy, we are going to ask you to talk a little bit about your early days in New York, being an artist in Brooklyn, having been from Brooklyn, and tell us a little bit about maybe what's most similar about the Brooklyn that you started out and what's most different about Brooklyn today.
Well, the Brooklyn I started out was you wanted to get on a subway and get out of it. It's not like the Brooklyn today. And so I started going to New York. I got into the High School of Art and Design. So that opened this whole world to me that didn't exist in Brooklyn. I mean, there was like the Donnell Library, and there was, you could get all these different things. You could go to the Art Student League and draw nudes when you were in high school. I mean, it was kind of cool. And it was just a whole different world. I mean, and when I was in that high school, you'd get out of the subway and you'd traipse through Bloomingdale's and look at all this stuff that lived in Bloomingdale's. And then you go to high school and you'd have teachers like Tom Wesselman telling you, just put anything you want on the wall. And I had another teacher there, Miss Schumer, who just taught you to, just open the world up, I started reading in high school. It just changed the whole world. That didn't exist where I was living in Brooklyn,
And what do you think of some of the things that might be similar to today?
Similar to New York or to Brooklyn?
No,
Brooklyn is wide open now. It's just a whole other world. I mean, I never get out there, but it's just an amazing world.
That's cool.
I mean, so my education started in high school, and then I went to Parsons School of Design. They threw me out. Then I went to SVA, and they gave me a scholarship. I mean, and in the middle of that is then the draft, because I got thrown out of a school, and then I was going to be drafted to go to Vietnam, and then I had to get out of that.
And what did you do to get out of? What did you do to get out of that?
I wore bikini underwear, and I went down.
And that worked?
Which was like very strange then, and I went down to the draft board, and I'm in line with kids I grew up with, and you'd have to strip, and there I am in this see-through white bikini underwear that
And so that worked. It was an effective plan.
It worked, yeah. It was effective until then when I went to drive a taxi, and I went to get my taxi license, and they said, "Oh no, you can't drive a taxi because you're an overt homosexual," and because that's what it said in the draft board or something. Mm-hmm. So I mean that worked out. I did drive a taxi, but I mean.
I want to move on, Billy, to your wall. So I want to talk about everybody's specific works in this show.
Okay.
John went to your studio, I think, with an eye towards picking one or two works. You've been in shows at Flag before.
Yeah.
You're always a crowd pleaser. People love your work. Oh,
thank you.
It was very specifically apropos for this show, for sure. And John came back, and next thing I know, there wasn't one or two works in the show. It was a career retrospective. So what happened at that studio visit, and then how did you?
It was like fun. I was out east painting the show, and and they wanted me to come into my studio. I went into my studio in the city, and they showed up, and they looked around the studio, and I have this wall where I just put up all this work, and and John said to me, "Well, what do you think about doing a piece like a wall piece?" And I said, "How big?" And he said, "Well, it could be like a whole wall." And then they sent me some stuff, and we worked it out.
It looks so great. Give us just a little bit of thoughts in terms of how you selected the works, because obviously you could have chosen anybody, and you chose very specific selections. So just give us a little bit of thought in terms of how you picked that all together.
We wanted something that somebody had that was, something that was in some collection. So the Jackie was a shoo-in because you could get it. The Jackie Curtis thing, Best the Woody owned it, and you had a way of getting it. And then and I have a lot of work in my studio, and so then we just started. We made a mock-up wall to the size of the studio, and I put it together with my assistant. And Kiara came over, and we just played around. We had things to scale, and we just put them up and moved them around, and then we sent it to you, and then I got a phone call the next day. What do you think if we put it by the elevator? What was I going to say to that? That's like the greatest thing in the world. So yes, please. And that's basically it. Just came together. I was working on a show. He saw what I was capable of. I saw what they were capable of letting me do it, and we just did it.
Well, it came out great, Billy. I would say it looks amazing. We're thrilled to have all those works there. And
I'm glad.
I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but hopefully you'll be better.
No, I've got this damn COVID, and I'm taking this medication, and it's driving me crazy. And I'm stuck out east, and I don't want to be here, but I came out here to pick up a pair of eyeglasses.
I'm gonna let you go and rest. I just want to make sure we got to hear a little bit from you. So
Okay,
thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Glenn, and I really appreciate being in the show.
All right, Billy. Great to hear you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right, that was Lisa. Nice. So, D'Angelo, why don't we go to you next? If you could talk a little bit about your work, that piece in particular, making that work. It's your mother. Working with your mom, I imagine, must be complicated no matter what you're doing. But you've made work with her on multiple occasions. So talk a little bit about that piece in particular.
Where would I start? Well, the image was made in 2019. I was on a trip home celebrating my mom's birthday. I took the image on her birthday, I believe, in 2019. But it was at my grandma's house, which is like an hour and 30 minutes outside of Jackson, Mississippi. That's where my mom's side is from.
And just to interrupt, do you say to your mom, like, I want to stage something, I want to play around with you under the camera? Like, what? Because it's a little bit of a staged piece, right? So
I would tell her I had, certain ideas, because at some point I realized there were many things that her and my grandmother wouldn't do in photographs. I tried to photograph them nude once, and my grandma was not having it at all. Was not having it. I feel like my mom would have if we weren't at my grandma's place, but I didn't push it. Even if I just wanted to be nude in front of them, they weren't. Well, my grandmother wasn't having it. But so I had made images with both of them that day, my grandmother and my mom, and they're on this long couch, but I photographed myself and my grandmother on one area where her hand is over my face, and I'm leaning into her. But the image that I made next was with my mom, and I told her I had this idea of, somewhat symbolizing the umbilical cord and this sort of mother-child connection. And I had asked her to chew this string of gum and stretch it from, her mouth to mine, and she didn't know how to do it. I guess she didn't understand what I was asking. My grandmother kind of got it, and she was like, yeah, it's like the umbilical cord. But I just ended up stretching the gum. And it wasn't necessarily my ideal setup, but it was just like, I just wanted to make pictures and then think about them later, pretty much, which is somewhat kind of hard. But I made a few of the images, and of course, it's like, it's not just my mother or my grandmother. Like, people in general have, things that they're self-conscious about, or, they don't, like, my mother didn't want her legs to be shown, or, my grandmother was like, I want my good wig, and, things like that. So it was, I will always tell someone, no matter how they look when I'm photographing them, that they're gonna look great, even if they don't believe it. It's like, that's just me, and how I see people in front of and behind the camera. But the staging of it all is is only extra, really, if there's anything, other clothing or no clothing, and the performance of it all. So I think for me on that day, it was like about what experience will I have with these family members and ones who I've been so close to my entire life, even though I didn't see them, as much as I would have liked to. But yeah, so like that image, Until We Separate is what it's called, in parentheses, Mom. That was like it's kind of hard to talk about now. My mom passed a few months ago, but and now we've separated in a way. But it's like it's a reference to so many relationships in history that have been seen pretty much under I don't know. You've got the Madonna and Child. You've got the image that's ingrained in people's minds of like what kinds of mothers are seen with their children loving them, or their kids in general. And I wanted to have this sort of conversation about this mother loving her queer son, her queer child. And that's kind of what some of the challenges are with photographing with my family. Like my dad, who's a Trump supporter and is in my work, loves my work. He just had a 1-year-old son like a year ago, so I have younger siblings now. But like, we've had a rocky relationship, but it's different when they're in my work. It's like they're proud to be in the work, and we don't necessarily talk about the issues that inspire the work, pretty much, but we have the work to look at and discuss. And
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing for a non-artist to think about, you making this work with your mom, especially now that she's passed, that like, it's just an extra element to your relationship that will always be there, right? And like every time you ever see that work and all the works that she's in, and in a weird way, like knowing that work of you and your mom is in a collection somewhere else, so somebody else is kind of being empowered by that relationship of you and your mom, is really a kind of unique experience.
Yeah, so my grandma passed 2 years ago in 2021. And this was unexpected, so it's just like, knowing that I was sort of, I was getting into photographing family more. I probably went home to Jackson maybe once or twice a year. And I had, all these plans to like go around and photograph family that I didn't see often, friends that I've met all over the city, the country, in and out of the country. That's just like a goal of mine, but losing people kind of like changes, or for me, that's kind of changed like how I go about, going back to being able to photograph people, photographing them over time. I'm like, at this point, who's to say I'm gonna remain friends with, the same people that I've, photographed over the years, or they're gonna be in my life when I want them to be. That's, those are some of the harder things that I don't necessarily have to think about, all the time. But when I'm faced with these sort of, experiences of, gaining and losing, and like my work changing and how I want it to change, It's a matter of like what I can do with people while they're in my
Yeah.
life.
I think that's also why your work is so successful, is because you have these kind of autobiographical aspects, but they so clearly relate to anybody and everybody. And so it's not just about you and your
Yeah.
mom, it relates to so many other things.
Yeah.
Aliza, maybe talk a little bit, because the piece is right behind you. And that work came out of your experience at the Queen's Museum, where you had a residency and had a beautiful show. But maybe talk a little bit about that specific piece, but also in the context of your overall career, because it's very emblematic of the type of work you make.
Sure. So maybe I'll start from the context. I had a show this summer at the Queen's Museum, and I came back to a community. I love what you said, D'Angelo, about this recurring motif of coming back to people. It's so meaningful. And I was also resonating with that because almost 10 years ago, I taught at Immigrant Movement International, and there was one family that I painted over 10 years. And I've seen a young woman, Marisa, grow up from the age of 14 to 24. And so this show at the Queen's Museum was like a combination of going back to a community that I had been in touch with 10 years ago. And so I had taught in Queens at a different center, and then I revisited various communities around the museum, and all of a sudden one day they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Andre, who had been facilities manager at the Queen's Museum for 30 years. So it was his big celebration with the director of the Queen's Museum and everything. And so I was like, Andre, I passed by, he was the first person that would greet me every day when I would come into my studio early, and the last person I would leave, when I would leave sometimes. And so in his office, he has the US Open by Queens and all these figures that are important to him, how he would volunteer during COVID. And I was like, come in, there was these blue couches in the museum, and I was like, come and pose for me so that I can photograph you. And so he wore the super snappy outfit, because he's a DJ as well. And then at the opening, he was even more decked out with Versace and really amazing clashing patterns and stuff. And so oftentimes my paintings end up being the background ends up being a kind of narrative of the time spent with people. And so I thought this floor was a floor, I don't know where I got it from. I think it was from a nightclub in LA or something, so I decided to put it here because it resonated with his patterns. But yes, this is kind of the way I work with thinking about how the formal elements in the work can become a manifestation of the character and the long time I spend with people. And now I can go back. He came to my studio quite a few times so that I could paint him a little bit from life, but also from photographs. So it's a kind of invention and also factual sitting from life.
And in terms of the nature of the people you like to paint, what makes it, when you see, or how do you decide who you want to paint?
It's like chemistry and a relationship. Usually, oftentimes it is from teaching or from having been involved with a community center and having given something back to a particular community and then getting involved in their lives through some kind of pedagogy usually or other way of involving. And so I was at the Queen's Museum actually because of a Delta commission for a mural, and then the show came from that afterwards. So I was there working at the Queen's Museum for almost 2 years, and they had a food pantry, and all.
But I think
these
the
things
Delta
that,
Commission is a good example. So the Delta Airlines Commission, Aliza, to make a huge mural at LaGuardia Airport, and you chose a pretty broad range of Delta employees. So it wasn't just the obvious pilots, but it was a lot of the service workers, people behind the scenes that would not normally be targeted to be highlighted in a painting like that.
Yeah, I worked really closely over 6 months with the Port Authority and with the directors of Delta to kind of choose who would be characters that would be representative of the Port Authority and of the airport. And I really got to know all these workers that are behind the scenes, like the homeless services that end up at the airport and things you wouldn't expect. A firefighter that was in charge of a lot of the September 11th, and then he was in charge of actually both airports. And so it was many different Zoom interviews and then choosing particular individuals. And
really cool. On the other end of the service workers theme, Pamela Anderson. So you painted you painted Pamela Anderson a bunch of times. And in fact, this painting is called The Last Fucking Pam, because I think you did not want to paint her anymore. But how did you first come to paint Pam? Why did you paint so many Pams? And what was it like working with her?
Well, I always admired her because I saw her as the antithesis of Marilyn Monroe, and/or Anna Nicole Smith. She was always said, "Listen, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a singer, I'm not an actress, I'm a pinup. I make my living through pinup." I thought, well, she has her own agent. She's the agent, and I thought, why not? And then I also, I always admired her. It was the back of my mind, and I really admired her because she was an animal rights activist, and I am too. And she hadn't eaten meat since she was a teenager, and I hadn't eaten meat or fowl in 38 years or something like that. So that too was in the back of my mind. And then I didn't think anything of it. She was just, somebody in the world. I didn't think about her at all. And then I got this phone call from Tony Shafrazi with David LaChapelle, who was her BFF at the time. This was 2006 or so. And I had a show up at Tony Shafrazi, and Pam and he were seeing the show, and he wanted to commission me, David LaChapelle, to paint her as a portrait. And I said, sure. And he wanted to give it to her and Kid Rock, because before they got married, it was a wedding present. And then in that interim period, maybe it was 2004 or 5, I got asked to be in Parquet, the Swiss intellectual magazine, and they featured, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a really good art magazine in terms of who they picked. They're still, all the artists they picked, they're still relevant. They so many people on the cover of Art Forum, they just disappear. But they've managed to do that. So I thought, this will be great. I'll put her as a centerfold in Parquet. And I proposed that to Parquet. They said, yeah, go for it. So then I made the arrangements with Tony. He made me, of course, Tony Shafrazi. You got to give me a painting. I said, okay. So I had to give him one. So, okay, I said, I'll do that. And then...
give it to him to sell, or give it to him as a gift?
Yeah, as a gift. Because he was going to set up me photographing Pam. And at that point, the marriage was already broken up. So it wasn't a wedding present anymore. I thought, I'll do this for Parquet. And hopefully they'll use it as the cover. I thought, that's so funny. So, literally, they didn't know what a centerfold was. I had to draw one out and fax it to them. This is when fax machines were prevalent. So I decided I'd take all her makeup off and I'd cut her bangs. Because she's really beautiful. She's like...
She's makeup free now, right?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? All of a sudden, she's irrelevant for what I saw back in the day. And, she has these freckles, and you see these people, when I shoot a lot of, I did anyway, commercial work, and there are people that glow in the dark, and she's one of them. And when you see these people, you can't even believe your eyes, and you've seen them on the street in New York, and, or some movie stars, things like that. So she was wonderful. She was charming. We went out to dinner with Courtney Love the first night. We went out to dinner, and they were just gossiping about guys, and my husband and I were just listening to them. And then I ended up doing the Parquet, and then I ended up making all these paintings of her. And I thought, well, I don't have any more. I made maybe 5 or 6. And Glenn says, I really want a Pamela Anderson. I said, I don't want to. Go pay somebody else. Go pick something else rather to pick. And he said, no, I want a Pamela Anderson. So I said, okay, and I did this, and I actually think it's the best one.
It's got the best title for sure, Last Fucking Pam. That's a great story. D'Angelo, talk to us a little bit about being a photographer in a time when
No.
every single person here thinks they're a photographer. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket.
We all are photographers.
And
that's true.
It's tougher being a photographer now.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's good to challenge yourself in how you make images if you're gonna call yourself a photographer, but you don't have to go to school for it. You don't need, you don't even need to watch a YouTube video. It's just, you just take pictures. You either take them or make them, or, you understand, how you're doing the thing you're interested in doing when it comes to, photographing yourself, photographing your friends, photographing a thing, or, making a photograph from scratch, which is where I'm at, or that's where I think I'm at right now, where I'm weaving and making images out of yarn, cotton, acrylic, and just like how am I continuing to make images moving forward, and just seeing how my work can grow in that way. But I think even for me, it's like, the technology moves beyond us faster than we can keep up with at times, and of course everybody who has a phone will be photographing something with it. Some people will lie and say they can't use their phone to photograph, but it's like we're being helped to do things quicker, but the challenges for me are keeping up with, all of these, and being able to afford, the things that will, help you make higher quality photos, have higher quality prints. Like, none of this, some people can afford to do it themselves, of course, but, my situation has been, my work is still printed at Lightwork in Syracuse. It's still, like, these relationships that I've built over time, that it just feels right. If it's not broken, don't fix it, And
you're not using Photoshop or anything like that. You're using.
I use Photoshop.
A little bit.
I use Photoshop to edit for color, take out, an empty bag of chips that's on the ground, maybe. Right. But mostly for color and light, I'll use Photoshop and Lightroom to, because I when I would photograph in undergrad, I would want my images to look like film, and I was shooting digitally, and I would edit the work to look like film color-wise, just like, 4:5.
Just because you mentioned it before with your dad being a Trump supporter,
yes.
Let's
say it louder.
How are you using the current political environment to fuel your work?
I feel like I don't know, like sometimes I feel like a very political person, and I feel like I do tend to want to be taken seriously a lot, but I'm pretty funny, and I feel like that shows up in the work at times through all its seriousness, and also just like the enjoyment of just photographing whatever I want, or making whatever I'm feeling needs to be made, whatever time. But I think it's been easier to, confront a lot of my challenges, and that maybe the people, who I may have an issue with personally, but they might look great in an image, So I still am at the point where I'm like, I will refuse to photograph certain people if I don't like them or their work. Or, if it's an actor, if it's a musician. I've had some bad experiences, so I'm like protecting myself, or that's what I say. But I feel like I won't sort of, I have values, and I won't, like sell my soul just for an image of a person, or whatever it may be that will make me question like who I am, what's the reason I'm doing this,
And how about you, Aliza or Marilyn? Do you feel kind of compelled to make work that's political?
For the longest time, representation and making images of a particular Latino community that hasn't been represented has been really important to me. But I just think it's more like the engagement I have with people that ends up making, hopefully, work that's meaningful. Like I have this work at the Met Opera right now, the front of house divas, and then the back, the workers that do all the stage sets and stuff like that. So, and I'm working with dancers because like during the Trump years, I was working with a lot of salsa dancers, going dancing and being like, who's the poet? Well, there's one poet that says like, hard times require furious dancing, you know, and we were going salsa dancing every week, and just like, I think I might have to go do a lot of dancing again. Hopefully he does not win. But just that kind of exuberance of color, and hopefully that's also political. It's not just the subject matter, you know, but the kind of presence, I think, of paint, and maybe is also political, apart from subject matter.
I think everything I do is political. Yeah, but in terms of making my art, I really do believe that there are people that are geniuses, like Kara Walker or Jenny Holzer or Barbara Kruger. You know, they're poetic, they're brilliant, and they're really up front and out there. And I think in my case, it's just threads. And I have threads of, but I always try and make a picture of something we all know and we've never seen before. And I think in that sense, I'm always political. And, but I'm an activist 20% of the time in my real life. I have been since I was 16.
Yeah.
I wish I wasn't.
And who are you excited? Who gets you excited to paint? I mean, you've painted a lot of celebrities and you've done a lot of work with that different communities. But what gets you excited?
Everybody I've shot, I'm really excited about doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm going to do Molly Jong Fast for my next show. Do you know who she is?
Who?
Molly Jong Fast. Does anyone know her?
I don't know. Who is she?
She's a pundit, and
Okay.
and she's going places.
Okay.
And she's really doesn't pull any punches. But then I'm also painting Cindy Sherman and Jeff Koons.
Okay.
I would love to paint Gavin Newsom.
These are.
Padma Lakshmi, who I met here
I'm
once.
painting her.
Are you painting her?
I'm painting her right now.
God, I so want to paint her.
Okay, I'll get her. She'll love it. She will eat this up.
No, we spoke to Padma here at Flag. She was here at Flag one night, and
I'm in the middle of painting her right now as an odalesque with no clothes on. And eating. She's eating. She's eating. She's eating right now in the painting. She's eating an orange peel, or an orange slice, but smashed cake is everywhere.
but like that's an example. Do you know her, or you get to know her during this? So
She's
you
my
know her.
neighbor.
But I mean, relative to the works that you're making, where maybe you're spending so much time on these works. I mean, you're spending a lot of time on these different works that, you know, photography, maybe it's not the same, but you're shooting them a lot. You're deciding which images to go with. You're maybe doing small manipulations. Do you feel like you're just getting to know the person even more through the process of making art when you're doing these kind of images of people?
No.
You don't. Do you, Aliza?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I wanted to paint her because I read her book on tape while I was painting something else. And I thought she was super compelling, and I love her recipes and stuff. But yeah, I feel like I do get to know people, and it is a process. But also, they're endlessly opaque. They're endlessly
Constantly, yeah.
Also. So, and that's what's interesting. Go ahead.
They're so, what is the word I'm thinking of? Something like Lady Gaga. She doesn't show you who she is. I don't see that. I mean, I wait till she's not paying attention to get the images. Or Roxane Gay, she's so guarded. That's the word. They're so guarded. And my luck, I'm lucky because they can't see me at all because I'm shooting behind glass, and they can't see me at all. So I just wait till I tire them out. Because Roxane Gay has a side eye, I just wait till they.
What about in your case, D'Angelo?
I think it's a mixture. For me, it's like most of the people that I would be photographing, I know them. That's kind of how I work. It's like if it's a stranger, I photographed strangers a lot in undergrad and tried to when I got to Syracuse, but I ended up turning the camera on myself. But then started to photograph people that I was becoming more familiar with, lovers, friends. no pun intended to the show, but
Do you do editorial work though still?
That came a little later, but yeah, I started doing editorial work in 2020.
So those people you obviously don't know.
You
by
know,
and large.
my first job was a week in Minneapolis, not long after George Floyd had passed and was murdered, and I spent a week with Black Visions Collective, this queer and trans-led collective in Minneapolis, who were raising funds for trans housing and healthcare, and also just like creating a safe space to like call out, you know, the leaders who are predominantly straight and or male in many of these, you know, organizations that are gaining notoriety but not sort of giving back through what they're trying to do. And it was, you know, I celebrated my friend here, Rashad, who was assisting me on that shoot. We like celebrated people's birthdays, and you know, we went to. It was kind of bittersweet. It was just like, you know, we were trying to celebrate, but it was also like, you know, we were photographing George Floyd's memorial. We were in, you know, the area. Also because the people we were photographing didn't live far from it, but it was a week spent, you know, diving into this place and these people's lives, and that doesn't happen often. So it's like a matter of how much time you have with people, and sometimes you still, even if you feel like you know somebody, you really might not, you know.
I mean, Marilyn, you still do editorial work too, don't you?
Yeah, I just shot something for this new magazine called The Wrap.
Mm-hmm.
I just shot Padma. Padma I know from Planned Parenthood, because yeah, she's a huge Planned Parenthood supporter. Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, and for their magazine. I think I know Julianne because I've known her for a long time. I've shot her a lot, but Natalie, she was a total blank.
And was she cool?
They're all lovely.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
they're doing a job. They're working.
Yeah, they started at 5 in the morning. They
Mhm.
gave me 2 hours. You know, I don't get to know anybody if I don't know them and I'm shooting them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I know Cindy really well, and so I'm really looking for the Cindy I know.
Right.
I shouldn't have said that. I know Glenn Ligon really well.
But the Cindy Sherman and the Jeff Koons, that's for a show? You're just doing
That's a show in L.A.
Of artists?
At Reagan. Yeah.
Of artists.
No, just people I admire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take some
Monica
questions from the
Lewinsky.
audience. You guys game for some Q&A? Yes, in the back, aggressive. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. This question, I did not expect everybody.
Again, I'll repeat the question, but go ahead.
Yeah, this question is for D'Angelo.
Okay.
I was just wondering that when you were spending time taking images of relatives, do you find yourself in the process asking them questions about family history, like genealogy, other relatives, grandparents, great-grandparents? I was just curious what kind of conversations came up, even with your mom, you know, would she talk about the past and her childhood?
Question, I'll just repeat it for the camera, just around questions of family history, genealogy, in those times when you're shooting your grandmother or mother or other family members.
You know, I don't think you were here when I mentioned that, you know, there are certain things or ideas that I have when I am trying to make images that might be historical references, an experience, whatever. But that's not always, it's not always like fleshed out, you know, during the times when I'm photographing a family member, a friend. So photographing my grandmother and mother, there were always just like images around. I have many of our family photo albums with images of family that I've never met, or I've only seen them as children and then might have met them as adults, things like that. But I think when I'm photographing, it's mostly the conversations are about what's happening in the images or how I'm wanting, you know, them to look at me, look away, things like that. And I feel like the history that I've come to know through my conversations with my grandmother, for example, who was, one of my big matriarchs. She was the oldest of her. Well, my great-grandmother had 13. 8 of them died at birth. They were like sets of twins. So my grandmother was the oldest of like 5. Wow. And then my mom was the oldest of her 2 brothers. So like they had, more of the experiences that they would just talk about, just without me asking. So I really, really took that and cherished that. And I kind of grew up not asking a lot of questions, and that's kind of like affected me, and how I find out more about, like what do I want to ask? What do I need to know, And even, my mom's passing, like I found out, I've heard a lot of stories through her friends and other family members that I've never known or heard before. So I feel like knowledge has just come to me, but I'm learning like how to ask more questions and try not to make the experience of photographing just about like the moment there. And that's also just becoming a better multitasker, I feel. But yeah, no, I think that's definitely something I'm looking forward to as I continue to make. Yeah.
Next question, yes, ma'am.
Yes. Hi.
Here, I'll just hand you this.
All right, that sounds great. Hi. I wanted to talk about financials in terms of making your own financial statements as you move forward in your career. Has it gone easier for you to track the money that's coming in and also be able to budget and know what materials you need and stay within that budget as well?
Wow, excellent question. The business of being an artist. Marilyn, you've made some changes in this regard lately, no?
Well, I didn't make any money till I was 53 years old. So there's something, and maybe you guys will agree or not, but I think it's really dangerous to hit the white heat of huge success. I think it fucks you up as an artist. And women, and maybe, John Michel's dead, but people of color don't hit that, like the Damien Hirst level. And I don't mind being really, really rich. I just want to be able to make my work, and I want to be able to say no to things I don't want to do or shoot people I don't want to shoot. And I feel really blessed if I can just stay in that place. And I think you're really lucky as an artist if you can be just slightly marginalized, because then the white heat's not on you, but you still have enough success to make what you want to make.
Is there any part of that that's self-protection, that you're saying that because, if that your ambition is to get there and you don't? Get there. What's there mean? I'm not being facetious. I just don't know what. I'm doing great. I don't have any complaints, but I don't have millions of dollars, and I can't buy a house in Italy or anything like that. But I'm okay. I have a really good life, and I had a terrible life for years. So I feel really blessed that I can do. I got here. It's great to get to that place for sure.
Mm-hmm. Contentment.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because I feel, so much of my life I had so much precarity in terms of everything, and now it's weird when your prices go up and everything. Sometimes things don't sell also. So then your costs go up, and so your studio expenses go up, and so I feel still in a bit of a precarious situation, and I don't know. And I don't know and I quit my teaching job, and then it was like, maybe I should not have done that. And then, so it's just all up and down, but I think you have to remember how you used to live and how it's cyclical, I guess, or something. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Because we're all really...
I could answer that in many different ways, but it's like, personal experience. It's like a lot of the things that have happened for me have literally just happened because I've made the work. No matter, I mean, I was in grad school when I made a majority of the work that's been shown with Higher Pictures, and I've been shown with them since 2017, and my work has been priced very low for a while, and that's partially why it's been just like grabbed up when it could be, for whoever could afford it. So it's just like, even though the work has gotten to different places of, different collections, personal, private, exhibiting in different museums, it's like I am still someone who's in a position where the work hasn't gotten to a place, where I have to, the work is not in a specific demand of like, you have to keep making it on someone else's time. I'm on my own time, and with that, it's like, I've not really been able to sort of have certain goals. So like a lot of the things that have happened for me have just like, okay, this has happened because the work was here, or you've made this work. And I've gotten to a place where I'm starting to make my own goals, and that also just, for me, is taking time. Like, I didn't come out of grad school wanting to teach, and there were points in my life where I was like, well, yeah, I would love to teach. It would be consistent pay. I don't get paid, from my gallery, weekly or monthly or annually. I don't get paid, I don't do editorial jobs like that. It's like, I am one person who is in this position of, I do not know when my next paycheck will come, or if it will be, enough to pay rent, which thankfully I don't have to pay for a year, for a while. But I'm in a position of, recalibrating where I am financially. Like, I have a shit ton of debt from, school, so I don't know when that will ever, be taken care of. But I know that I can continue to make art. That's what I'm here to do. And sometimes I don't even want to do that. So it's like, when I am in a position of, being inspired and knowing that I have to make art to keep myself going, or when Higher Pictures is like, yeah, this will be when your next show is, and, what do you have? What do you want to make? It's like, not many people get to decide for themselves, what Marilyn was saying. Like, I would love to continue to be in a position where, I can go months without making work. I can, not have to think about certain things, but that's just that's how you move,
It's always precarious.
Yeah.
There's just never, ever a system.
Look, the point you made is the key point, which is there is no salary, right? There's no, it's not,
it's hard.
You work
It
at Goldman
really
Sachs,
is, for
you're
me,
getting
at
a
least.
salary every 2 weeks until you get fired, right? And so you can plan on it, but I'm just, as an artist, there's no, you have a sold out show, it's great, but the next show may not, so I think it's a function of managing your expenses much more carefully than almost any other career path, because in another career path, you typically have a salary and you can budget, you can plan. You really can't do that as an artist.
Yeah.
And I always question these people that say, "Oh, I'm teaching this class on how to be an artist," and it's been my experience that there's as many ways to be an artist as there are people making art. There's exceptions to every rule.
Totally. Next question. Yes.
How are the works selected for this exhibition? I see a lot are in private collections. I'm just curious how the subjects were chosen, if it was the artist or gallerists, or I'm just curious how that came about.
Yeah, well, I'll say as an override, so all of the shows at Flag are works from a variety of places, just like any museum show. So we'll borrow from museums, we'll borrow from collectors, we'll borrow from artists directly, we'll borrow sometimes through the galleries. So, we had this idea of this show, and the team, Madeline, John, and Caroline, spend their time figuring out where to get works that they want that fit the theme. sometimes, most of the time, it's specific works, but sometimes, as you heard with Billy Sullivan, it was, okay, let's go to the studio. He makes portraits of his friends as almost like a daily practice, so there'll be a lot of material to choose from there. So that's where the studio visit. Other times it might have been, we know John Curran often paints his wife. Why don't we call John and see if he has one that he's willing to lend to us? So that was a painting, happens to be, it was just finished. We called John. John's like, it's never been shown before. I'd be happy to lend this to you. I just finished it. It's of my wife. So it's a combination of just reaching out. Sometimes we'll reach out to a gallery. I will say, in support, there were a number of very smart and really good gallerists who we called and said, we want to borrow an Alessandro Rejo. And they said, of course. And they said, but I have another artist you should consider. He does this type of stuff all the time, would be a perfect fit for this show, which is a really good thing. We didn't take all those, but it's a really good example of a gallerist really being an advocate for their portfolio of artists, which is what they're supposed to be doing. But that doesn't happen as much as it could, but it does happen with aggressive, assertive, good gallerists, including Larry Gagosian. We had a show a couple of times ago. Larry called me up and said, I really think that this artist of mine should be in your show. And those are great calls. We actually, in that example, said no, even though we work with Larry a lot, and he's one of the most generous gallerists that we work with. That one artist was not a fit, but we work with his artists all the time. And I'm just saying, the good gallerists and this was Larry himself. So this is like good gallerists really make a point of saying, okay, how can I support my artists? I want them to be in more shows. Let me reach out and see if I can get them in this show. Yes, sir.
I'm a docent at the Krasner House, and I use a quote from Lee's that I'd like to ask you about. She was once asked when she decided to be an artist, and her response was, I'm a woman, I did not decide to be a woman. I'm an artist, I did not decide to be an artist. Does that resonate with you, or was there a point in time when you said, oh, that's what I want to do, I want to be an artist when you were 12 or something like that?
I wasn't good at anything else.
But Marilyn, you said you didn't start selling art till you were 53, but you were an artist from when you were 20.
Oh, yeah, since I could remember.
Yeah.
I was bad at everything else.
I thought I studied kind of social work and psychology in Mexico for like 3 years before moving to the States to study art, and I thought I was really good with people and kind of. And I really like being in social settings, like teaching and stuff like that, and that kind of. But I also think the being an artist was kind of inevitable, and I kind of it is what it is. No, I'm very happy with being an artist, obviously.
No, it's very sad sometimes, like being an artist. I always knew I wanted to be an artist. Photography wasn't how it started for me, but I was drawing as a child. I wanted to be an animator and was just drawing literally every day. My own things from cartoons I would watch, and that led to going into this visual art program that I was in for like 9 years, where I was taught to draw from life. I was making ceramics, printmaking. So like at a very young age, having all of these experiences with different materials and just continuing to be in school for art outside of academics of it all, and found photography in high school, and that kind of like changed, still being inspired by everything else, but it kind of like changed like how I thought about getting messages across, and I just continued to pursue photography, but more recently have brought those other things that I love into art making. I've been in bands, I've made music religiously.
So creativity has been a part of you
so it's
for a long time, forever.
As many other things that I may be good at, I'm just like, this is the thing I can put it all into.
Yes.
So my question was about, how did you make work for the show? It prompted a conversation I had with Billy, because I just did a show and I sat with it. There's so much to know. There's so much you feel like you should know when artists are making work about their friends and their lovers, and you want to know, but Billy could not care sometimes, and And so I'm curious about all of your practice individually. Do you think context really matters, or do you prefer, you know, sort of what the external brings to it, in your own craft thread?
Context of an exhibition when the work is seen, you're saying? Or?
Like a portrait of someone that you know. Doesn't matter your relationship to someone who's viewing it, or
Who's viewing the work?
No, once it's left the studio, it has a life of its own, I think.
Becomes a different animal.
I would agree. It's like as much as I put narratives into my work, and some of them that I don't know right away, it's like once the work leaves you, they take on, you know, the viewer's own ideologies and perspectives.
Interesting. Yes, Laura.
I would like to ask if the experience of the pandemic with the impossibility to gather gave you the idea that this relation with the friends and the family members are very important and push you more in the portraiture in general.
Great question. So did the pandemic change your perspective on friends and lovers and working with that universe in particular, just because you weren't gathering, you weren't able to get along for so long?
I'll put in my 2 cents. I don't think my work is about portraits, friends and lovers. So I feel like I make work from the times work about the times I live in. Culture's my subject matter, not really portraits. I just happen to do portraits because I think I like the idea of women owning art history and portraits and bathers and odalesques. I think I like to see women just doing that. All women, you know.
I thought the question was more for Glenn or something. No.
Try to love is like a lot of things are about people themselves, and yes, it's like a lot of people just don't have the capacity to like keep up with other people's lives, offer things that they're not, you know, just trying to receive themselves. But you have to be willing, you know, I'm no expert, but you have to want to like love, even if you don't understand, you know, what it is or how to. And sometimes, you know, love languages don't translate how we want them to. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like the most important thing we can do is be specific about, you know, what we want, how we want it. Not necessarily like what we have to offer, because you might have something to offer people that you're not offering, but it's what people want from you, and it's like, you know, vice versa. It's really all a challenge. It's very challenging.
It's very possible. So you go.
I'm not going to cop out. Lately I've been really into like thinking about art, like knowing your own mind, which is so hard to know your own mind, you know, but also like with love, just like somebody that surprises you. And I think painting, when it surprises you, it's really, and when somebody like raises your, to either to be better or some kind of aspiration in love, I mean, that's my definition, I guess. Some kind of somebody that helps you aspire to not necessarily good, but something surprising.
I was gonna say, it's definitely possible that art can come from pain, but really good art, really successful art can inspire love. You know, so it can deliver love even if it comes from pain.
Well, you can love what you're making.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like looking at really good art makes you really grounded in your thoughts and your own experience, and that's an amazing process, you know, to look at great art and how it really allows you to contemplate yourself and your own processes, I think.
Interesting.
I think that's really interesting. Just what both of you have been saying, and I wonder, you know, something like, you know, I knew my mother or my grandmother made like blankets, quilts. I never learned how to make them from her. I dated a weaver. I had an interest in weaving. I'm weaving now, and it's like I wanted this sort of tangibility of like the thing I was making, my hand put into it. You know, I've been making all kinds of art my entire life, but there's something about specific things that I make like something that would need love and care, and it's like, you know, a dedication, like a quilt or a tapestry or something. And I feel like we could put a lot of, you know, the love that we're trying to give into a thing and not so much a person. And it's like a person might love that thing, and it's like some people might think that that's the end of the day. And, you know, I don't feel like we have to decide where it ends or where it begins of, like, you know.
Well, I love the fact that we're going to wrap up talking about love, so that's terrific. So, D'Angelo, Aliza, Marilyn, thank you all for being here. Billy on the phone, thank you all for coming. And get home safe. It's definitely a little slippery out there. We'll all stick around if anybody wants to come say hello, but thank you for coming.